The Irish novelist Colm Toibeen recently visited us at Johns Hopkins, where I teach, and in the course of his reading and discussion, he made the remark, somewhat offhandedly, that in the Catholic tradition of his childhood, there were plenty of prayers to the Father and the Son, and even more, it would seem, to the Son's mother, but very few to the third person of the Trinity, the Holy Spirit. The comment made me think that as a child, Colm Toibeen never worried about passing a test, because in my Catholic tradition, "Come, Holy Spirit, fill the hearts of your faithful and kindle in them the fire of your love," was a prayer I repeated fervently before and often during every exam I ever took, most especially and most fervently if that exam involved numbers. I mentioned this to a graduate student friend who had been in the audience, which led her to ask me, quite simply, what the notion of the Trinity can possibly be about. The whole one God, three-person thing, she said, sounds a lot like three different gods, each with various superpowers. She said superpowers, not unlike multiple gods. She said, good-naturedly, it's kind of a word game, isn't it? Saying persons instead of small g, gods. I mean, how do you even think about it? Since it was an Irishman who had prompted the discussion, I was tempted to use the old St. Patrick standby. Consider the shamrock, I might have said. But the student was a talented fiction writer and an avid reader and an agnostic with no faith tradition of her own. So I found myself asking her instead to consider the way a novel happens. I said happens because I wasn't thinking about the way a novel is composed by the writer, nor did I mean the way the self-conscious reader assesses a work of fiction. I said happens because I was thinking of the way a novel happens to any one of us when we give ourselves over to it. I was thinking of the confluence that occurs when we read, confluence of the writer's mind, the narrator's mind, and the mind of the reader. It's a simple enough formula, although when you stop to think about it, miraculous in its simplicity. The writer, in the silence of her composing room, puts her mind, her language, her experience, her aspirations and observations, even her own will, at the service of the narrator. The narrator speaks and creates a world. The reader, in turn, lends his inner voice, the voice with which we speak to ourselves, to the narrator, and thus that created world comes into vivid existence. Eliminate one part of this particular trinity, and the novel, the story, the poem, literature itself disappears. Clearly, without the novelist, there is no novel. Without the narrator, even a narrator who greatly resembles the novelist, there is no created world, only a transcript or a polemic. Without the reader, that world remains nothing more than marks on a page or, worse yet, on a glowing screen with limited battery life. This particular 3-in-1 is not a matter of three separate entities with three sets of powers, superpowers or otherwise. This is a trinity that is absolutely necessary to the very existence of the novel. 3-in-1, I told my student, making this very point. For some of us, it's a holy trinity indeed.